So if you've been learning English for a while now, you probably have experience learning either American English or British English, or maybe a bit of both. If so, you've probably already noticed that there are sometimes different words for things. For example, in America this is a cab, while in England people say taxi. Different words for the same thing, right? And there are heaps of words like this. But have you ever wondered what words people use in other countries, and in particular in New Zealand? What words do people use in New Zealand? In this video, we're going to compare some different words found in American English and British English and find out which words are used here in New Zealand. I'll also introduce some new words for times when we don't use American or British vocabulary at all, and we can use Kiwi words instead. Sound good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome. I'm Rose and this is Speak Kiwi, where I help you learn New Zealand English. So let's start by briefly comparing some words that are different in America and England. For example, when talking about the season, Americans say fall, while British say autumn. To Americans this is a truck, but to British it's a lorry. Americans say cab, Brits say taxi. We also have couch, sofa, sneakers, trainers. You get the idea. So which word do Kiwis use? Well, it depends. Fall or autumn? Autumn. Truck or lorry? Truck. Cab or taxi? Taxi. Couch or sofa? Couch. Sneakers or trainers? Sneakers. As you can see, depending on the word, sometimes we borrow from America and sometimes we borrow from England. There are also times where we might use both American and British vocabulary. For example, when talking about this insect, we might call it a ladybird, which is the same as in America, or a ladybug, which is the same as in England. Or we might call this an elevator or a lift. Both words are in common use. Of course, there are some times where we choose not to use American vocabulary or British vocabulary, and instead we have our own Kiwi words. For example, when talking about this paved road that people walk on, we choose not to use the American word sidewalk or the British word pavement. Instead, we call it footpath, which is our own special Kiwi word, footpath. You can see an example of it written on this sign here, and also this one here. Another good example is the word we use when talking about these. Now, I'm not sure what these are called in America and England. I've heard some different words like rain boots, rubber boots, Wellingtons, galoshes, but it doesn't really matter. We don't use those words. In New Zealand, we call these gumboots, or for short, gummies. If you spend any time in rural New Zealand, you're gonna see people wearing gumboots nearly everywhere you go, so it's a good word to remember. Gumboots. And one more example, this here is what we call an ice block. In America it's a popsicle, in England it's an ice lolly, but in New Zealand we say ice block. Pay attention to this one because it can be a little confusing for non-New Zealanders. One of my friends from England was confused when I said I'm going to get an ice block because they thought I was talking about an ice block, like a literal block of ice. So to be clear, when I say ice block, I'm talking about this, a nice sweet treat, ice block. Actually, it can be useful to learn about misunderstandings like this because there are a few words where the meaning is so different that it can actually be quite confusing. I want to share just one more example with you and hopefully help you avoid misunderstandings in future. I want to look at the words trailer and caravan. So in America, trailer is the name for this, while in England it's called caravan. In New Zealand, we also call it caravan, same as British English, right? In New Zealand, if we heard the word trailer, we would imagine this kind of container on wheels that we tow behind a car, right? Trailer. Why is this important? Well, let's consider how we might have a misunderstanding if we get the word wrong. If I talk about going on holiday, staying in this, I can say, I went traveling in a caravan. If I get the word wrong though, I went traveling in a trailer, might sound a little off. Somehow I don't think you'd have a very good holiday traveling and sleeping in a trailer. See what I mean? So to be clear, in New Zealand the words we use are caravan, trailer. Take care with that one. I also want to note just briefly that sometimes the Kiwi accent can change how words sound. For example, taxi can sound like taxi, 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 and lift can sound like luft, lift, luft. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this is an example of how the sounds shift sometimes. So even when we're using words from America or England, our Kiwi accent makes it sound distinctly Kiwi. The Kiwi accent is a big topic, so we'll come back to that another day. But I just wanted to mention those couple examples. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. I'm here to share some good news. The good news is that even though New Zealanders only use certain words like we looked at earlier, generally speaking, we understand all varieties. What I mean is, even though New Zealanders only say autumn, we understand fall and autumn. Even though New Zealanders say footpath, we understand pavement, sidewalk, and footpath. New Zealanders have a lot of exposure to American and British English, so we're really familiar with different words for the same thing. This is good news for you. When you're talking to us, just use the word you know. We'll understand. Of course, when we're speaking, we'll probably use the words I gave in this video, so it's a good idea to memorize them for when you're listening, but in general, don't worry about it too much. Use the word you know. If you'd like to review the words I introduced today and learn some more words like it, I've made a vocabulary list that you can download for free. There's a link in the description below, so check it out after this video. To recap, these are the words we learned are used in New Zealand. Autumn, truck, taxi, couch, sneakers, ladybird or ladybug, elevator or lift, footpath, gumboots, ice block. I highly recommend that you check out that vocabulary list I've provided and really get familiar with some of the words Kiwis use. I know learning about all of these differences and varieties of English can be a bit confusing, but it is important, and I hope that by breaking it down and giving you this list, I can help you understand a little more about New Zealand English. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it valuable, and if you're interested in learning more with me, consider subscribing. Anyway, that's all for today. See you in the next one. Bye bye.